Welcome to the Nines presented by AT&T here on the Cloud9 channel. We've got Vulcan today from the LCS team to discuss a lot of the performance that Cloud9 has had over the past few weeks. So this is going to be interesting because obviously Cloud9 has gone 1-1 over their last 3 weeks, but a lot of it has been kind of a differentiation of styles that we've seen from the roster, and then we can chat about the most recent game in a little bit more depth, which will be their Team Liquid game. So let's go ahead and get Vulcan on and start that conversation. Hello. You're very blurry, Vulcan.
Hi. Yeah, let me try to fix that real quick.
You're also very loud and destroying my eardrums, so we got that going for us as well. Let me turn you down a little bit. How you doing?
There we go. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
So how have the last 3 weeks been? A little bit rough for you guys. You've taken more losses than you did now in the entirety of last split and playoffs combined. Has that been rough on the team at all?
I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't like a little bit rough on us. No one likes losing on our team. Obviously, the losses don't feel as bad considering we're trying new stuff and experimenting and all that. And I mean, we all agree that it's better to lose right now than to lose in playoffs or at Worlds in a similar fashion. I mean, the loss versus Team Liquid was very embarrassing, and it's like one of our big rivals, so it felt pretty bad to lose it that way to them. But at least it's like regular season. There wasn't too much online, so we're just looking forward to playoffs.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about when I do interviews with you guys for the On Cloud9 series, which you guys can check out on the C9 YouTube channel, has been that your real goal this season before we headed in was to really diversify your play style, and pretty much everybody on the team said it's okay if we take some losses because it's more important that we have different ways to play the game in the long run, right? Because you went through spring kind of playing the same early aggressive style, and the question is, can you guys do anything else? Or if the meta shifts, what's that going to look like? Do you still think that's your goal for this split?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the goal. Maybe not in the spring where we really wanted to win every single game.
Sure.
But right now, I think diversifying our play style, branching out is definitely like our #1 goal. We do not want to be like a one-trick team and easy to abuse in draft versus some of the top teams in the world. Because we think right now maybe they can bet a few champions and it would be really hard for us. So we're trying to just master a few more styles so that other teams cannot get an advantage from draft only, and we're harder to predict. So that's definitely a big goal for us.
When we look at the past few weeks, so your first loss came in using the Sena Wukong combination, which is directly affects you. How, when you played versus 100 Thieves, so first off, you did get a win with it, but then you also had a loss to 100 Thieves, which was the first kind of upset first loss of the season, first game of the second round robin. Why were you guys using that, and what was your goal in lane playing the Sena alongside Sven's Wukong? Like, what about this style was attractive to you, and how does that help Cloud9 going forward, learning how to play that?
Well, we think that Wukong is really OP, like as a champion in general. Anytime that you're able to lane with him, you should pick it just because the scaling it offers and how much it can impact team fights. So the main reason was just so that we can have Wukong on our team. And Sena is so that you can kind of keep the Wukong in lane, keep him sustained, and you kind of have trade patterns with him. So you can just fight the AD or the support 1v1, and then if they go over aggressive, Wukong can just jump in and you can fight all in and win that way. But personally, I kind of felt useless on that champion. On the ADC, I felt like I couldn't do much. It's hard to get vision. I can't start any fights. So I wasn't a big fan of being the Sena, So. Yeah.
So what you're saying is you wish you were Kaiser on Mad Lions and that you were the one playing the Wukong.
Yeah, pretty much.
Have you had that conversation since, like that you were the one who should be on the Wukong, who really wants to be on the Wukong?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Zven a little bit about it, but we both agree that Zven's better at both champs right now. So, and also the reason we went with me being the Sena in the first place is because Sena has the wards and it feels more natural for me to ward and for Zven to farm. So, yeah, it is natural that way. But at the same time, the Wukong's more engaging, so I have the better engaging sense because I play Alistar and all those champs.
Sure.
And Sena's a backline. So, I mean, there's points like it's fair for you to argue in both ways, but I don't know, playing sena, I just felt like I had no power over the game. You know, I'm just autoing people for a little bit of damage, healing my teammates. Didn't feel very useful to me.
One of the other aspects is that you didn't have the same kind of pressure because so much of Cloud9's style was really characterized by having you guys pushed up to turret, which freed you up to do very early dragons. And that's not something you get when you're playing the Sena Wukong. You're kind of playing closer to your turret. You have to concede that pressure, and you have to concede kind of early game advantages. Was that hard for you?
Yeah, I mean, again, it felt like we wouldn't have as much power over the game because when we're pushing, we have the ability to go dragon, like you said. We can go to Rift Herald. We can roll mid. We can invade any blue buff or any red buff. We can do so much, but when we're on the turret, we don't have much power over the game. It's harder for Blabber to get his camps even. It's harder for Blabber to look for plays. So definitely limited our options to not have bot push when we're used to pretty much having bot prio the whole time, or the whole split, last split, and anything that we'd pick, like 50-50 matchups, would get pushed anyway. So it makes the game harder to play, but I think it's good that we have to learn how to play without bot prio, because at Worlds, I'm sure some matchups that we think are winning right now versus any teams, we'll play them at Worlds and maybe we won't get bot prio. So we need to find a way to, win the game without having bot push, or ways to find plays without having bot prio.
What were some of the lessons that you took away from the Sena Wukong weekend? What did you think you did well? What did you think that you really needed to work on, both as a team and you specifically as the Sena player?
Well, I think it was mostly drafting points, because other teams had a really, really good draft into the Sena Wukong, and I think we focused really hard on having Sena Wukong. We didn't focus about how good Galio would be into it, and then like Camille Galio 4-5 really surprised us. We didn't expect 100 teams to pull out a comp like that, and it was really, really good versus Wukong specifically. Galio presses W and Wukong goes in. You can't really use your W yourself because the taunt will reveal you, and it felt pretty hard to play that game. You can't all in bot. Galio will press R, so it was drafting points, but also, we need to be able to play games versus lesser teams that we have losing draft and be able to win those games, I feel like. And that's something that Eric or Lickers brought up, is even though we have losing drafts, if we play versus 100 teams, we should find ways to win because we are a lot better than they are. So
makes sense. And moving on to the next week and your next loss, that was the loss where you guys, it appeared you weren't really experimenting, that this was a much more standard C9 composition. You didn't have a lot of film to look at because this was Evil Genius's, I believe, first game. It was the first weekend, I think it was their first game where they were running Huni and Golden Glue. And so with these roster additions, I would say that it really dramatically changed the way that 100 Thieves plays, because instead of playing through mid lane and sending Jizuke out to carry and to split push, they're playing with a much more like control mage mid laner in Golden Glue, and they're playing with a significantly better top laner than Kumo with Huni in terms of his gangplank play and carryability that we saw in that game. So because this one felt more standard, I would say that this is like, for me, this is the only like real Cloud9 loss, in that you guys were trying to play to your comfort and you still ended up losing that game. What do you think were the issues there? What was your goal? Let's start with, what was your goal heading into that match?
Win the game. Honestly, we didn't want to. It was kind of an ego battle versus EG. Cloud9 playing their our top side playing their old teammates. I was playing versus Huni, my old teammate as well. So definitely an ego battle going there. We gave their whole team pretty much their comfort picks. Golden Glue got Zoe, probably his best champ. Huni got Gangplank, one of his 2 best champs. Zayzal got his signature Alistar, probably his best champ. So they got a really easy draft out of us, and we weren't experimenting that hard, but me and Zen played Ashe hard, which we haven't played very much before, and it was also us trying to experiment with, or not experiment, but we weren't really sure how to draft like bot lane and jungle. So we were kind of experimenting a little bit that way, but it was mostly us being unsure what was the best, whereas of right now, we kind of know more our priorities and how to draft to make sure we have the best advantage possible. And versus CG, we weren't completely sure yet. They got their best champs and they outplayed us on them. We made mistakes, right? It wasn't draft only compared to, I think versus 100 Thieves, the draft was really hard. We ran it down a little bit, but on equal, like teams on equal footing, I think 100 Thieves would win most of the time. Whereas EG, the draft was pretty even, and we we got shit on.
So what? So what happens next? Like, what was the takeaway from that game and from that weekend?
I mean, I made some mechanical mistakes. I think also we could have taken control of the game more. We had a lot of control around mid with Bard. I could have probably synced up with Blabber and Niski to get more control of the game and look for plays. But during the early game, I was kind of scared of Alistar being in my jungle with the volley bear. I can't face check anyone. I'll get one taps. But I think if we played together, we could have gotten more control of the game. Maybe we can snowball that way. And that was the big thing. And also maybe not give one tricks to one trick champs.
Calling them one tricks, that's pretty intense. I'm not going to argue about some of those players, but yeah, I like you coming out spitting a little bit of fire here at the start. When you look forward to the next week, again, you do see a little bit more of the experimentation, and specifically in that Team Liquid game, which is really, to me, very interesting because I very much enjoyed your draft in that game. And I thought that as far as a game plan went, you guys were looking at Team Liquid. You were saying, okay, this is a team that generally plays for the late game. Let's put the pressure on them to do something early if we draft a comp that is going to massively outscale them and buff up this Hecarim with the Lux and Sona barriers, like have the crowd control there with the Shen, really like punish the back line and be able to have this super heavy engage and protection for a super fed Hecarim, right? So was this a strat that you guys developed specifically for Team Liquid, or is it just more generally something you wanted to use in the LCS?
It was something we can generally use in the LCS, but we felt like it would work very well versus Team Liquid. Just the points that you said, they play very slow. Usually don't punish enemy mistakes very hard. They only fight the dragons. So we thought with Sona Lux, we can get a few items and then group up without being too far behind because they're not very good at snowballing, right? They probably won't dive us and do the most possible punishment, I guess, for the bot duo. So we thought we would be able to group up and then just fight them, which we were able to do. But unfortunately, we had a few bumps in the road against the Blitzcrank, picking us off. But I think the game plan was pretty good. Some people were blaming like a troll draft or we're having too much good shit maybe, but I think it was a really good draft, and
I think it was a great draft.
Winning most of the time. Yeah, it was a great draft, right? And we just messed up a lot. So I mean, like I said earlier, it happens, and it's regular season, right? So we don't really care, and then I think we'll probably have a tiebreaker against Team Liquid, and then we'll win there. So no biggie for our first seed.
We're going to walk through this game and kind of talk about some of the key instances, but this is one of the first times that I'm aware of that Sona Lux has been played in combination instead of, last year we saw more combinations like Sona Tahm Kench, Sona Tarik. What is your job as the Lux player, and why did you want to settle on this pick in that position?
Well, the combo is something that people are like, there's a duo in EUS that is spamming it, and they're really high elo just from playing that. And the Lux is more of a second Sona compared to before when you have the Tahm or the Tarik for protection for the Sona, whereas Lux does that a little bit, but it's mostly, I guess, enhancing your carries more, just like Sona does. You do more damage than you would with Tahm or Tarik. With your ult in teamfights, you can have a lot of damage. Same with your Q, you can combo with Sona ult into Lux bind into Lux ult is a lot of all-in threat in lane. So the Lux is like, it's just like second Sona pretty much. It's a lot different than Tarik or Tahm, where it's more defensive. Lux is a bit more aggressive in that way.
Also, it does help when you have that barrier because you're able to protect the Hecarim as the Hecarim goes into the enemy team, whereas, melee champions or Tahm Kench is more about reactively protecting something rather than proactively providing a shield so that the Hecarim has more sustain when they go into the fight, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd say Tarik is a little bit more, it works a little bit more or better with Hecarim than Lux does because Tarik can link up with Hecarim and then get a stun off when he goes in.
Sure.
Also, the ult, you can time it with the engage. So I think Tarik would work better with Hecarim, but Lux is also pretty good with dive comps. It worked well with Set. When he walks in, I can just shield him. If he gets hooked, he'll be tanky enough to survive, and then we can re-engage. So Tarik's a little bit better, but Lux is more versatile.
What was your reaction to seeing Core JJ select the Blitzcrank in draft? Because it does seem like this was a particularly good pick, especially if you guys in the bot lane don't have any summoners. Your team comp in the late game is very reliant on shields, whether from Sona or Lux or the Stand United coming in from Licorice in the top lane on Shen. And the Blitzcrank ults can instantly clear those shields. Was this something that you guys were a little bit worried about, or that you had a conversation about how you're going to handle the Blitzcrank in some of these scenarios?
We expected them to pick Blitzcrank. That's something we practice in scrims. Every single time we would play Sona Lux, the enemy team would pick Blitzcrank. And most games, it's a bit rough really for the bot duo. I mean, one hook is one death, so it's hard not to fall behind. But every single time. We would die a few times, our jungler comes around, and we went through to either way, and then we can snowball the game that way, just start grouping and play like that. So that was something we were worried about. In practice, it went well, even though it's a bit rough. We were able to just come back and win the game. And yeah, I mean, I think Blitzcrank that Core had a really good game, right? And most of the time, the Blitzcrank won't have that much impact. And I feel like the Blitzcrank shouldn't have as much agency if we didn't make so many mistakes. So we were worried about it a little bit, but we expected it, and we knew we could beat it like pretty easily with our comp. Even though he can break so many shields, there's also the set shield you didn't mention with his W.
Yeah, it's very
like
true.
The biggest shield.
That is
in
the biggest
game.
shield. That is true.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's a really good pick, but we thought he wouldn't be able to have that much impact.
You guys had a bit of a rough laning phase in that. You died, but it seemed like every time that one of the deaths would happen, because obviously they were targeting you when your summoner spells were down, but Licorice or Blabber would come in, or Niski, and you guys would end up with a favorable trade. Were you happy with the way the laning phase went, in the way that your teammates ended up benefiting from your deaths a lot of the time, or do you think you could have played it better?
The first time I died was to a gank when we were getting Rift Herald, and that was pretty bad. I think there was no way they would contest Rift, so there was no reason for me to walk up. It was pretty obvious they'd look for like a split map or a trade map play, and I should just waited for the wave to come in on the trade, and I think they would have a pretty hard time diving us, so we just collect the wave, wait for Blabber to base with Rift Herald, and then take over the map after that. So that death was pretty bad, and after that, I think Sven died twice as they were making a play on him, and then Blabber and Niski collapsed. We got channeled, and we cleaned up a few more kills, but yeah. I think the Sona die is pretty bad because she kind of needs gold more than Lux does, and Sven died twice in those fights, even though they were favorable for us. It was not optimal. I think if we played a little bit more slow, and Blabber was closer by, Niski was closer by, we would stun them without having anyone die, and that'd be a better position for us. But at the same time, Team Liquid were going for plays without vision that were a bit sketchy, or a bit, I guess, careless, because they were pressured and they needed to kill us, right? So they went for plays where they didn't have any vision of our jungler. And if Blabber's like a little bit closer, they all die and we all survive. So, I mean, we didn't expect them to go for those kind of plays because they generally don't. You know, they play for late games. So, yeah, it was bad that Sona died. But when I died, I mean, in comms, I was like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter if I die, right? I'm just a Lux. I'll just come back and it'll be the same. So, it was bad. You know, I was in the moment like, it's whatever. But it was a pretty bad death. But yeah, I think Team Liquid was playing like the plays they were going for were kind of, I don't know, careless.
So you guys did end up net with like a pretty big advantage. And I think what was even better for you guys is that you started stacking up a lot of the dragons as well. And considering that, I think that was one of the very few win conditions, besides you guys making a bunch of mistakes around objectives, which ended up happening. What was happening within your team? Because if you guys go up 3 dragons to 1 with this composition, surely the conversation is, holy shit, like we've got this in the bag, right? You know, we're going to outscale them. We're on sole point now. How could we possibly lose this game?
Yeah, I mean, the idea we have generally when we play this is we will give the first dragon and fight every single dragon after. Even though Sona Lux is kind of a scaling pick, it also, as soon as the second dragon spawns, you're pretty strong for team fighting. If you have like a Acrium type of champion that you can buff. So the idea is give the first one and then fight every single dragon after that. Go to Rift Herald, fight there too. So, I mean, yeah, we were pretty confident. I mean, our top side, we were rolling them. We got a few kills in mid, which probably shouldn't happen, right? And I think the scaling in that game is not like that insane for us. I think it's pretty even. I think Ezreal is a pretty good answer versus Sona Lux in general. It was one of the best answers versus Sona Tarik or Sona Tom last year, just because you outrange and you can safely clear the mid wave. And generally, the Sona Lux team will want to run at you on the mid wave and like stop you from pushing. But it's really hard to do that versus Ezreal because of how safe he is. So I mean, Ezreal's a very good pick versus this, and I think the scaling is pretty even, right? So. I mean, we felt very confident in that game because we were rolling them topside, and the game should have been free win because of that. But I think if they're not inting, the game would be not hard, but it would be like a pretty even game.
So let's talk about, if you turn on the stream, Vulcan, we're going to take a look at the team fight that happened around one of the Drakes. Because that team fight in particular ended up being incredibly important for you guys in that it secured your third Drake of the game and your second Cloud Drake overall. But there seems to be a split call here, and when I talked to Sven yesterday on Summoning Insight, he said there was a bit of confusion about whether you guys should go in on this, even though you just gotten the objective. And obviously Mordekaiser drags them in, but then Blabber ults super deep into the enemy line where there can't really be a significant amount of follow-up from you guys in terms of damage. What was happening in this moment, and why was the decision to go in?
Well, I mean, with our champions, we always are looking for dives, and Blabber's most impactful way of playing team fights, I guess, is to go for the carries. So he was looking for that. I think team fights with Sona Lux get very, very confusing, so I don't fault him too hard for going there. You know, it's very hard to see anything at all of what's happening. Niskitari had a good angle as well, but I mean, after review, we saw that we probably should have waited for set to have ult before we look for anything. If we start the fight without having settled, then they're going to poke us down, and we can't really go in, so they're just going to get free damage in. And we were lucky to get the dragon there, so I think the call should have been get dragon. Eric tries to kill the Mordekaiser if he can, and we tried to do it because they had a really good position, and yeah, we don't have settled to go in first. And I think if Ekrim has to walk it down the way he did, the fight's not going to look too good. So we kind of got confused because, I don't know where Chem's going, but I think if we just wait for ults and then we somehow get the dragon, we just get out of there, they're in a really bad position, and we'd be in a really good position. So,
do you think that losing this fight affected your ability to win this game at all? Or was this not the biggest mistake that you guys made?
I mean, it was one of them. Obviously, us dying is pretty bad. We could get the dragon and then go topside, get full control. They're kind of zoned from their mid lane and their top lane. I think we'd be able to get top T2 here. So it's one of the big mistakes. I think the bigger one is when Zen died to the Blitzcrank.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. No, but yeah. So I mean, it was one of them. I'd say it's not the biggest one, but definitely they kind of add up in this game. So
yeah, we can take a look at that because the next clip is going to be the hook that basically ended this game, right? And part of what I wanted to point out was that this wasn't really Sven's fault in many ways because Blabber dodges the hook and just sort of leaves Sven, as you can see on your screen, to get hooked by the Blitzcrank. But you did know that they were there before this Baron play began. So what was the call to kind of go into that brush, or what were you guys trying to accomplish during this moment, getting vision around the Baron?
We wanted to get to the mid wave. We have Channel, we have Nissi coming in from the river. The call was like we knew Blitz was there, like you said, so we were like care Blitzcrank. We were trying to like jiggle in and out of the bush to bait the hook, and then we got pulled. I think the better call was to go a long way. We just go around to mid, and then there's no risk at all. And once Nissi's closer, I think Nissi can tank hook a lot easier because he has a lot more HP to tank the damage, and then also. He doesn't deal as much damage as Blabber, so Blabber being pulled is pretty bad because he needs to be dealing damage in those fights. So, I mean, the call was Care Blitzcrank, he's right there, and then we got pulled. So,
well, also, you do have to point out that there is actually a split second of time when they place those wards in the bush before the control ward kills the vision, right? And so they use that extremely small window to be able to hit that hook in the first place, right? For Core JJ to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and also like, part of me, if you look at this too, if Blabber had been hooked, he had ult, so at least he could have ulted out back over the wall in this situation, as opposed to the Soda, who had no flash, who could, I mean, Sven could only ult them and try and CC them in that scenario, right?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be as bad, but either way, it's not great to have your Akram ult out
Sure.
for Blitzcrank just using hook. So we all agreed we should go around to the main wave. It's a lot safer, and then it limits like ability of Blitzcrank to, win the game solo. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame like Blabber for dodging or Sven for getting hit. I think it's just like a team thing. We need to go around there.
And at this point, afterwards, we do see Team Liquid go ahead, take the Baron, and then be able to close out the game. Tactical is super fed at this point in time. Another aspect of this play, though, that I do want to point out is that basically Impact is chasing Licorice around in the bot lane, which is preventing the Stand United from coming through. And even though it would have been the teleport would have been interrupted, do you think that the Stand United shield would have been enough for at least Blabber to kill Tactical here? Because that's my impression of this situation.
Yeah, that's something Blabber said in the interview, that if Shen ulted right here, you would probably get the extra Q off and get Tactical, so that I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be able to do Baron in that case. They don't have enough damage. So yeah, we also said if Blabber doesn't go in there and wait for Shen to be able to ult and actually like teleport into the fight, then we'd probably be able to stop the Baron as well. So it's like either or. But I mean, the critical mistake is obviously
the pathing.
The line bush right there in the pathing, yeah. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, if Shen ult came through there, Ezra would have died and the game would have been different. But it's like such a small thing after like a big mistake. So
when you guys got out of this game, considering that I think Team Liquid played the early game quite poorly, and you had a huge chance to win, and this draft was great, you had this kind of unique composition, but you still ended up losing. What was the atmosphere like with the team?
We were pretty frustrated with ourselves. I was pretty mad. I mean, I did mistakes in that game as well, so I was mad like at the situation. Anyone particularly, right? I wasn't angry at my teammates, so I like took a walk to cool down, and then we had a review like an hour or two after the game. And yeah, I mean, we were pretty frustrated with it. We looked at mistakes. We had a lot of mistakes. I think Niski was the one who played the best in that game, and every single other person other than Niski had like a big moment where we made a big mistake. So yeah, I mean, we messed up as a team. We were mad. We were embarrassed because it was a terrible way to lose a game. But yeah, it's just regular season.
Yeah, and also at the same time, I think that, at least for me, this kind of draft and this kind of experimentation is like, you guys had such a strong advantage that by losing, I think you learned enough, I would think, that you can easily correct these mistakes for next time you run the composition at a professional level, and it gives you a new kind of layer of strategy and depth that teams have to look out for that they weren't able to predict, or that you weren't even able to play against them before.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've kind of unleashed Sona Lux in the LCS, and now every single team will try playing in scrims, and we'll need to figure out how to play versus it. So it's going to be a very, very, very annoying week. And yeah, in 30 minutes or in an hour and a half, I guess I'll find out how to do it. But yeah, it's good to get that experience. And playing versus Blitzcrank on stage is a lot different than playing versus in scrims. So we got that experience in, and yeah, next time we'll play, we'll be a lot better.
You said you found this from a duo that's playing Sona Lux in EU West. How did you discover that this was happening, and how did you do your research in order to put this lane into professional play? Because it's not something we've seen before.
I think Sven got a DM from EU regional league player, and he was like, "Have you seen Sona Lux in scrims?" And he was like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about? Sona Lux? What are you saying?" And then that guy linked, I think, the OPGGs of the two players, and we looked at their runes. The matchups that they played, they didn't ban like Blitzcrank. They would play versus Blitzcrank a lot of their games, and we copied their rune setup. And yeah, when we play versus Blitzcrank in scrims, it felt like they would hook, but we're tanky enough with our shield so that pre-6 we won't die, and post-6 we play with our jungler who can tank hooks, and he can just go in for us, so it didn't feel that much of an issue. And we pretty much copied like the whole setup from the two players in EU, yeah.
How much research do you do on when you find something like this? Is this something new for C9, or is this something you guys have been doing over the course of the year?
I think that one specifically, or like that type of I guess copy is pretty new. There was a Sena Wukong as well, but we got it from Madlands.
Sure,
We
yeah.
got to see like the bind being played in more competitive settings, so that was easier to kind of copy, I guess. But Snorlax, we figured out ourselves playing it in scrims a little bit. We tried to hide it, so we didn't play it versus every single team, because whether you like it or not, some teams like leaks will happen, right? So we tried to limit ourselves. We played like one game on I think Tuesday, that's what it was, and then we played 2 games on Friday, so that Team Liquid wouldn't be able to scrim the team we scrim on Friday, because they're not scrimming anymore. And like hopefully they don't hear to the grapevine that Snorlax is being played by C9. So yeah.
To keep this stuff secret, do you ever like try and do 2v2s with the academy roster, or play against like hide strategies with the academy roster in any way?
Yeah, we do. I mean, when we play warm-ups, we practice it as well.
Nice.
So yeah, we do it a little bit, but it's not something we do too often. Just on warm-ups.
Okay, let's take a break here and get the Cloud9 Roundup in. Everybody, when we get back, we'll do a Puma giveaway. We'll talk about itemization in that game, because that was a hot button topic, and we'll talk about Core JJ versus you, Vulcan, and how you guys are performing on the season, because I think Core JJ is definitely in the conversation for MVP of the summer split, so I'd love to hear your take on his play. And then we will take some fan Q&As, so be sure to start typing in Twitch chat when I ask for them, and I'll go ahead and read some of those, and you can ask Vulcan any questions that you have for the last 10 minutes or so of the show. So let's take a look at the roundup.
Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes, and welcome to another edition of the Cloud9 Roundup, your source for all of the Cloud9 news and information across Cloud9's teams here on the Nines. First up, the League of Legends episode on the Nines, so we'll start out with some League of Legends news. In case you didn't know, the C9 LCS team, well, they went 1-1 again for the 3rd straight week, this time dropping a game to Team Liquid with that wacky Sona Lux Hecarim composition, but they did pick up a convincing win up against Immortals. Now, 2-0 was the score this week once more for our Academy team, as they get closer to defending their spring split title. This week, the wins came against Team Liquid Academy and Immortals Academy. Congrats for another flawless week for our Academy boys. On TFT, Cloud9, well, we hosted our Nebula semifinals Friday and Saturday. That means for Teamfight Tactics fans, you could expect the finals here on the Cloud9 Twitch channel this week. Now, how did Cloud9 fare in PUBG Mobile this week? Well, we ended day 10 of the PMWL West in 1st place with a whopping 416 points. In Rainbow Six, well, Cloud9 lost the match 6-8 against Giants Gaming, but finished 2nd place in the Asia Pacific League North Stage 1, and that means you'll be seeing Cloud9 at that big 6th major in August. It's looking better every single week for the Cloud9 Valorant roster. Although Cloud9 has yet to lock in all 5 of their players, they did play in the Ignition Series event hosted by PAX Arena this last week. They picked up some really big wins against Immortals, Homeless, and then they managed to face Sentinels in the finals. They took a loss 1-3 to Sentinels, but this is a much improved Cloud9 Valorant roster, and we can't wait to see what they do in the next month and at the final Ignition Series event for North America. Furthermore, our boy Mango had a pretty interesting week. He managed to compete in that same Valorant event as the Cloud9 main roster, but he went 0-4, so not the same result. However, he did compete online with some Smash Melee in the Ludwig Agren Championship Series 2, where he went 4-0 in his matches without dropping a single game. Finished his run against Zane in 2nd place. So congratulations, Mango, for a strong finish in Melee. Moreover, on the Cloud9 organizational side, Zico, Venruki, and Grayson joined the Cloud9 family as World of Warcraft content creators. So be sure to check out their streams and videos if you're a WoW fan. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Cloud9 Roundup. Now back to the Nines.
Ah, yes, the Roundup every week, a special time for us all. I know it's your favorite part of the show, Vulcan.
Yeah, I look forward to every single one. I love seeing you in the cowboy outfit, so it's a great time for me.
Let's do a Puma giveaway. We will be giving out a Puma gift card for those of you who are joining us in chat here on Twitch. You can use hashtag Puma to enter if you live in North America and are over the age of 18. Be sure to check in with our moderators in chat and claim your prize if you win. So go ahead and get all your spamming done now so that we can have questions later on in the broadcast. So let's talk about itemization, Vulcan. And I know that this was, I think it was a little bit overblown. I know it was a hot button topic around especially Niski and Licorice's builds in this game. I'm not going to say it wasn't a problem because I do think it was not optimal, but I also think that it was not the reason you lost the game. I think that some of these plays that we were talking about earlier when we were looking at those clips were much more impactful, but I'd love to get your kind of take on it and hear what the team thought about it. So let's go ahead and bring up the itemization. This is at the very end of the game, and a lot of the criticism was kind of based around, with the team composition that Team Liquid is running here, they are primarily AP damage composition. Even Ezreal, 3 out of his 4 abilities are AP, but he's still doing, I don't know, probably like 60, 75% like attack damage with his Q and then with his auto attacks, obviously, that get faster with his passive. You guys ended up, first off, I think the kind of build that we saw from Blabber was really good with the very early QSS to eliminate the possibility of the Death Realm from Mordekaiser. And in a scenario where Licorice is split pushing, the Hydra and the Adaptive Helm versus it gives him the push, the Hydra gives him the push, and the Adaptive Helm is a counter item to the Liandry's Torment, right, from the Mordekaiser. And the question was, what is the Frozen Heart for here, and should there be more HP? Should there be more MR? Why the Ninja Tabbies in this specific scenario when you need to group up as 5 in team fight and his survivability against all this AP damage is really critical, right? So what was the conversation you guys had after the game like about how the itemization could have been different, or did you conclude that this was, in fact, given the situation in the game, the best possible option?
We didn't really touch on the items in the team review. I think that's mostly something that the coaches can do one-on-one, or the players can realize themselves. For the Shen build, Frozen Heart is an item that Eric loves building on Shen. He thinks it's very good in general. Obviously, this game might not be the best team to build it versus, but it's kind of his tech. So I think it's just like he kind of had it might have been a habit to buy Frozen Heart. And then Niski has Demon's Blade, which is all of armor for only Ezreal, who does like a bit of physical damage, but I think Deadman's is an item that feels a lot better for set, or is like very good so that you can run in and find an angle. But yeah, I mean, I think the Frozen Heart is just like the tech that Eric usually does, and he probably built it because he usually does it, so maybe he didn't like put too much time thinking about the items he should purchase. But yeah, we didn't really touch on it in the review because like you said, there was bigger points to touch on.
I mean, and just in general, having the extra CDR on Shen is extremely valuable because you want to maximize the uptime of your taunt and get the Stand United as fast as you possibly can, so that you have more opportunities to have the big plays in terms of crowd control or engagement in team fights. So I do generally think that it's a good item, even if it's not necessarily ideal here. When you guys hear this kind of criticism, because I was surprised, having watched the game, that there was so much critique over this itemization when I saw what I would consider much bigger issues with the way that you were playing the map or making the mistake around pathing that were things that no amount of items would have changed in this game. What was your take? Did you feel that criticism at all, or what was your take on the conversation that happened afterwards around the itemization versus other mistakes that you might have made?
I saw it a little bit. I don't know if people were like, putting the loss on that. Obviously, we don't think the items played that big of a factor in our loss. We have, a few mistakes to look at that are a lot bigger than this. But hopefully the people that are putting it out are just putting it out because it's not optimal. They're not like, you know,
Yeah.
blaming the loss on them. But yeah, my take is we should always, you know, try to build the best way possible. If we didn't, then people should bring it up. That's fine. We'll look at it. But yeah, for us in reviews, like this is not something. We're not going to spend 10 minutes talking about Eric's items. You can go and look at it themselves and look at the effectiveness of the items he builds. But we're not going to have Reaper, you know, pull out the belt and like,
Sure.
Eric, why did you build Frozen Heart?
Yeah.
Next time you go Wits End. And then, you know, we're all there watching. But no, so yeah, we talked about it. No, we didn't talk about it at all in review, and we talked about the few points that we shown on the stream.
One item I do think that was very smart to build this game, and I'd love your take on it as a support player, is that we saw Core get a very early QSS and start using it to be able to effectively dive Licorice under the turret by negating his taunt when he went in first. What did you think about Core getting this really fast QSS on the Blitzcrank to affect Team Liquid's strategy to try and come back into this game?
I think QSS is a very good item to buy versus the Titan comp that we have. Storm of Lux, it's good versus Settled. If you get ulted, you can QSS out of it. It's good versus the Shen. So it's something I build as well on Blitzcrank specifically because you want a frontline as Blitzcrank to look for hooks, but you're also very vulnerable to getting chain CC'd. So I think QSS is a very good buy versus the amount of CC that we have, and I'd do it versus that team comp or something like, if I play versus something like Ash Thresh, I did QSS very early. It feels very good on Blitzcrank, so definitely a good item to buy here.
All right, enough about the items. Let's talk about Core JJ and you, and kind of C9 and Team Liquid's performance overall. First off, thanks to Microsoft for providing us this data, is some head-to-head stats between you and Core JJ that I wanted to highlight because I think it's pretty interesting that Core JJ is getting a lot of credit. And as I said before, Core JJ might be the leading MVP candidate of the summer split because he is hard carrying Team Liquid alongside Jensen in a lot of these games. But if you actually look at the stats, you yourself are doing very comparably well to Core JJ, despite the fact that you guys have the same record. You're dying significantly less than he is, possibly because he's going for more playmaking champions or trying to make more plays or force more plays himself in order to carry. But your KDA is almost double what Core JJ has. And I think that a story that's kind of flown under the radar is how well you've been playing this split when all the attention has been on Core. Have you felt that that's a fair narrative, or what's your reaction to your own level of play so far in summer?
Well, I think looking at the stats like this is good, but in context, I think Core JJ is playing a lot better. I think he's, like you said, carried a lot of games, and he's looked very, very good on bars specifically. He's made a lot of game-changing plays, and he's carried games that way. So I think it's hard to argue that I've been playing better. I think I'm also I have better players in every position compared to him. So he has he's put in a tougher situation, and I think he's as of right now. I think if I had to vote, I would vote for Core JJ over myself in the pro voting, right? So yeah, I think I'm playing well. I think Core JJ is playing better, and he has to do a lot more to win games. So yeah.
I agree with you that it's really interesting to talk about Core because this is one of those times where the stats don't tell the whole story, because I looked at this and I was kind of surprised. But a lot of it has just been the eye test with Core JJ that, like you say, it's been the big plays that he's made that aren't necessarily reflected statistically that have been the story of his performance, not necessarily a super consistent statistical performance.
Yeah, I mean, we can't look at a stat here of how many Bartles carried the whole game alone. How many plays did he make that?
I mean, we could make those stats.
I guess we could, yeah.
That's like one of those human judgment stats, though, where you assign a level of impact to a specific play and say how many high impact plays is this player getting. But unfortunately, we don't have that level of dedicated stats teams in League of Legends yet to make the human judgments around that. All we have is the data that we can pull from automation. Let's take a look now at the comparison between C9 and Team Liquid as teams so far. One of the factors has been that you guys started out in June by going flawless and then have taken 3 losses over the course of July, whereas Team Liquid, they started 4-2, but they've won almost all their games so far in July. So a weaker start, but they've been getting stronger as the split progresses. Now you guys have gotten weaker, but also more experimental as the split progresses. How do you consider yourselves in terms of power compared to Team Liquid these days?
I think we're still so much better than them. I think even though once again, if you look at the stats here, they look like a very strong team and they look like they're having a much easier time compared to us. But if you look at their games, their wins are not convincing at all. Oftentimes they'll be in losing positions and any team will be too bad because you're in North America to close them out. So they'll find a way to come back because they have very experienced players. Core and Jensen will have a big impact in the later stages of the game, in mid and late game. So they'll find a way to win. But they have Fiesta games. They'll fight at Dragon. It'll be a flip, and then Broxah will steal it, or they'll find somehow an angle. The enemy team will kind of get dizzy and they'll get outplayed. But their wins are not convincing at all. But I think if you look at our wins, it's a lot more convincing, and we're able to snowball a lot better. So I think we're still stronger. And if you take a look at the games, you'll see that Team Liquid is kind of struggling in a lot of these games, even though their record shows that they're dominant. I think they could easily be like 7 and maybe the math correctly 7-7.
One of the surprising stats here, I agree with you on those points, and yes, I think their record is better. They've won a lot of those coin flip games, and had they won only half of them, they would have had 2-3 more losses in terms of their record. One stat that really surprises me here is that Team Liquid is only taking 44% of Dragons despite having an 11-3 record. And Dragon's Soul is such an important win condition of games these days. Even if you don't get it, being able to force a fight around the possibility of getting it. And so getting under 50% of the Dragons seems like it's a pretty big indictment of Team Liquid's play style. Do you think that it's possible in the long run to be a successful or a top team in any professional region right now with only a 44% Dragon kill rate?
I think it's hard to say. It depends on the type of team comps that you play. If you play something that's a little bit slower, like, for example, as Yumi, Genji was playing that every single game last split. So you'll probably be giving a lot of Dragons until you're at a point where the enemy team can't fight you, so you'll get every Dragon after a certain point. But I think for Team Liquid, it's like they get a Dragon in early, and then they lose the second, and then they get the third one, and then the fourth they lose, the fifth they lose again. So it's like they're not playing like, I mean, they're playing for skilling, right? But they're playing comps that could fight early, and they're just not familiar with fighting early, maybe. And yeah, I think it's kind of worrying because top regions like LEC or LPL, they will play a lot more aggressive early game, and I feel like Team Liquid will have a really hard time holding up.
Let's move on. Like, while we wait for some Twitch questions for you, so we'll give the fans a chance to ask you a few questions of their own. Do you think that even in spite of these losses, that any team is close to Cloud9 right now, or how do you rationalize these losses? Just as experimentation for you guys, or the random off game? And do you think anybody's really going to challenge you for the Summer Split title?
I rationalize it as we haven't been playing as well as before. Specifically the EG game, right? We weren't experimenting very much, so yeah, I think EG could be a pretty good contender for second place or for challenging us if they're able to like branch out and have more champions. They played, I think, the exact same comp that they beat us on last, or like 2 weeks ago. They played it last week, right? And they had every single champion like the exact same, and they were able to win on them too. So I think if they're able to branch out a little bit more, they could be a contender. Team Liquid, I'm not too worried about. Like I said, I think they're not very strong early in team. I think we could use it. TSM is the same thing as the last 2 to 3 years. They're very on and off. They have highs and extremely highs and extreme lows, so not too worrying there. Yeah, not sure. I think FlyQuest is looking a bit better, but we've never had any issues beating FlyQuest. Same way for Team, like they're pretty similar to Team Liquid, where they won't fight us early games, so we're able to snowball on them. So we're not too worried about anyone right now.
So first up, in Twitch chat. Sammy2412, congrats for the Puma gift card. Second off, let's talk about some topics about international competition. So Lol Bryden asks, are there any teams internationally you worry about or look forward to playing?
Well, my answer to that was always G2, but they might not be making it to Worlds. So
It's not looking great. It's not looking
yeah,
good.
it's not. I think apart from them, Damwon is a team that looks very, very dominant early game, and I think they'd be very interesting to play versus. They look like they're going to pressure us a lot early game, and then there's also Top Esports where they play a slower game, but they're all like very, very talented mechanically, so they'd be very, very fun to play versus as well.
Do you think that G2, along these lines, Sneaky the Walrus, which is a great name, do you think G2 will end up pulling out of their slump, or do they have deeper issues, do you think, from watching their games at the moment?
I think they'll pull out of their slump. I think with like the level of play they've shown in the last year, it's hard to think that they won't come out of this. Every single player on their team is really good. I think they're just actually I have no idea what's happening, but I feel like they'll come together and have a playoff run.
Yeah, and also it should be noted, guys, that because they won the spring split, they're virtually guaranteed to at least get a slot in the summer playoffs because of the circuit point system that Europe uses. So they only have to come together for that one playoff run, guys. Like, it's not like they can suck for the next couple weeks and it won't really matter. Here's an interesting question. G Wood Tamu asks, do you think overconfidence and complacency has become an issue for C9 given the lack of consistent competition in NA?
I think overconfidence maybe a little bit. I would be lying if I said we were not extremely confident going into every single match and every single scrim. We think that we'll win. So we're at a point where if we lose, it feels terrible compared to when I was on Clutch. Losing was like, again, I guess, whatever. And then if I won, I was like, yeah, a win. That feels insane. And now it's kind of the opposite. And I think complacency is not a thing at all. I think we all work extremely hard still in the same way that we did earlier in Spring Split. So complacency is not an issue, but I think overconfidence, you could look at it as maybe a double-edged sword.
People are pointing out that you do need to get into the top 6 for the LEC playoffs for the circuit point to work, which is true. But I think that G2 has still a very good shot of making those playoffs. Sunshine XE just wants you to know that you're doing Quebec proud. So congrats. Do you think the competition in NA has improved since spring? Mercy Cookie 8 asks.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 losses, even though we're experimenting. I think we could have been experimenting in Spring Split a lot more, and we still have the same record. So I think it's looking a bit better for NA. Team Liquid was 9th place; they're now 2nd. TSM is a little bit better. FlyQuest is doing worse, but I think they're slowly coming back up. So overall, it's improving a little bit, but not something that worries us too much.
How do you feel about the balance between Season 1 champs and Season 10 champs should be done? Just buffing damage numbers or slowly reworking most champs? So I think the question here is like, of the original 40 champions that were released in League of Legends, many of whom have somewhat outdated kits right now, how would you like Riot to kind of deal with that based on the modern metagame that we have 10 years later?
Well, I guess with the direction that the game is going, probably reworking the old champs, because new champs nowadays have 10 passives. They have spells that interact with every single spell interacts with your other spells. It gets very complicated. You have Thelios, which I couldn't play. I'm sure of it. I can play Ashe very fine. I've never played her in my life before, but I can pull it off. But I wouldn't be able to play Thelios. Yeah, so I think the champs are very complicated, and the old Season 1 champs kind of have to get reworked to be up to date, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like, I understand that a lot of these champs have to be reworked to be viable or to be less linear or binary in terms of their execution. But the other part of it, me, is scared, because every time a champ gets reworked or Riot releases a new champ, its passive has like 33 different rules to it, and I don't want the game just to become more and more and more complicated. Part of me likes the simplicity. Like Blitzcrank hasn't changed that much since, release, and he still is very effective, and I wouldn't want to see a champion like that change. But the other side of the coin is you have like another release champ like Rise, who has been reworked 10 times already because they can't make him work in the professional scene and the casual scene simultaneously, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a hard time coming up with a simple champ that, like Blitzcrank is a great example. A simple champ that can do a lot and is pretty versatile and has like a clear strength and it's easy to balance in that way. And they're like releasing very complicated champs to be original, but I think like a simple champ would be great right now.
Do you guys get Lilia this weekend for LCS, or are you on the same patch? Okay, so it's a new patch, 10-15?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What do you think about Lilia along those lines? That's not a question in chat, but I'm curious.
Well, I was permabanning it during last week because I didn't want to play versus the champion I wasn't going to see on stage. So it was permabanned, and then I've been opening it, and I've not seen her a single time. So I'm not sure how to answer that question. I guess I'll see it today. It's maybe. No idea.
Have you taken a look at, there was a tweet from one of the people on the balance team, not with the patch notes, but with the list of kind of buffs and nerfs. Did you see that at all? I'm curious.
Like the upcoming nerfs and buffs for the next patch?
Yes.
I saw it a little bit, yeah. It's like 30 champions. There's a lot of changes for like the playoff patch or something.
So I'm asking that because this person is asking a question that I know you can't possibly know the answer to without knowing what those buffs and nerfs are. But if you had to theory craft, how do you think, based on that, the meta will change as we get towards Worlds? Because they've said that that patch is specifically for the playoffs for summer in all the regions.
Yeah. I mean, I just saw like this champion list, so it's hard to say exactly which nerf will be very impactful. I assume the meta won't change too much. I think the meta is mostly being played because of dragons and Rift Herald and the way they work. So it's like champions don't really affect the meta too much. It's mostly just the neutrals and the way they work.
Let me change the question. If you had to change the meta in a way to make the game more fun for you to play and for people to watch going into Worlds, what are some of the changes you would make?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me see here. Buff Tom Kench.
No, please no. Nobody wants that, Vulcan. Nobody fucking wants that.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think the meta is okay. Having to fight dragons really makes for like a pretty entertaining game if teams are gonna fight them. I think Yuumi should be nerfed. Like she could be maybe removed from the game, and that would be better.
I think we'd all be happy with that.
Yeah. Anytime Yuumi's in the game, one team's trying to do nothing until the game is unplayable for the team without the Yuumi. So it makes the games very uninteresting unless like you're playing a full dive comp. We have to dive Yuumi 5 times or else the game's lost, and that could be interesting. But yeah, hopefully Yuumi's out of the game. Yeah, I think the meta's pretty good right now, honestly.
Any champs that you'd like to see buffed to make the game more exciting? Like any champs you'd love to see in this meta?
I like Alistar.
Me too.
Some Zizal's playing it a little bit, so it's kind of playable, but it's not like it's not that OP. I think if Alistar could be meta, it's pretty good because the Alistar counters are also fun. Like Gragas support just played versus Alistar sometimes, and I think that's a pretty fun champ. So Alistar's a pretty good answer to that.
Well, I hope we get to see your Alistair play. You've got to get to scrims, so we have to wrap up this episode of the Nines, presented by AT&T. Congrats on the Puma gift card win as well. Hope you guys have better luck this next week. Maybe another 2-0 week, right? This time around, you guys are playing who? TSM, and who's the other team you're playing this week?
Golden Guardians.
Golden Guardians, that's right. So another hopefully 2-0 week for you guys, right?
Yeah, I think it's finally the week where we do it. It's gonna feel so good.
All right. So hopefully we'll be seeing the first 2-0 week for Cloud9 LCS in a month. We will see you guys here next week. Just so you know, for the rest of the this year's run of the Nines presented by AT&T, we are going to be going through LCS and Academy players. So it will always be League of Legends based from this point forward. So if you are a LoL fan, be sure to come back on Tuesday mornings Pacific so that we can continue to have these long-form interviews. Also, feel free to hit up me or Cloud9 on Twitter if you have any suggestions for the show. I've been really enjoying these kind of in-depth, long-form looks at things, and thanks for providing all your insight today, Vulcan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Monty. Always a good time.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.